Entire legacy of Aurangzeb. If you ask me, Aurangzeb was the original ISIs, the kind of unspeakable brutality which he had unleashed upon Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj. Hindu community, a very awakened Hindu community. So you better not, kind of prick this Hindu community. Having said that, there is no place for violence. I think it is about time that jihadis realize that. Aurangzeb had a Gajwai Hind agenda. So the communist historians, post-independence, I think took advantage of the lack of research or the lack of authentic first-hand information available from that period and used it to paint a false picture of secular heroes. Aurangzeb was not secular. I'm sorry, Babur was not secular. Akbar was not secular. Just prior to the 2014 Lok Sabha elections, the Congress government had brought in an ordinance wherein they gave 133 properties, if I'm not mistaken, in the heart of Delhi. They transferred it to the Waqf.
So today I am joined by BJP's national spokesperson, Tuhin Sinha. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Vikramjit, my pleasure. It's great interacting with you.
So my first question to you will be on the Aurangzeb issue. Why is this discussion around Aurangzeb being brought up in this time? And is it solely because of the Chhawa movie? Or is it something else?
You need to realize this is a revivalist era. A lot of things which were taught to us while we were growing up and which we accepted without questioning. I think people are now more awakened, they are more enlightened, and they are questioning the entire legacy of Aurangzeb. If you ask me, Aurangzeb was the original ISIs, the kind of unspeakable brutality which he had unleashed upon Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj, wherein he tortured Sambhaji Maharaj for a good 40 days. And, the details can't be mentioned over here. At least I would feel very uncomfortable mentioning the details of that brutality. The way he inflicted death upon the 7-year-old and 9-year-old sons of Guru Gobind Singh, and obviously, scores of other acts of brutality which were carried out across the country. Kashmir, during his 49-year rule between 1658 and 1707, most of the conversions in Kashmir happened during that era because of obviously of the unspeakable brutality. The same was the story with Bengal. So the point is, such a legacy has no place in the modern era. So whether it is Germany or France or Austria, in those countries, it is legally prohibited to glorify the legacy of Hitler. But unfortunately, in India, you have some apologists for Aurangzeb who double up as his fan club and who, derive some kind of a perverse joy in glorifying his legacy. That includes, members of the Samajwadi Party. That includes even a cretin like Sanjay Raut, who apparently said a few days ago that Aurangzeb's tomb is a symbol of Shivaji's, courage and bravery. I don't know, which roundabout way of glorifying Shivaji do these cretins find. But point is that a lot of these people end up glorifying Aurangzeb, which in turn provokes the Hindu community. Like I mentioned, this is a very resurgent Hindu community, a very awakened Hindu community. So you better not, kind of prick this Hindu community. Having said that, there is no place for violence. I think it is about time that jihadis realize that. Aurangzeb had a Gajwai Hind agenda, and the Gajwai Hind agenda has absolutely no place and needs to be neutralized in the country.
When the opposition's in Maharashtra saying that BJP is trying to play communal politics with this, so how will you react to that?
Like I said, when you provoke people, who provoked? Abu Azmi provoked, which is glorification of Aurangzeb.
Literally, Sanjay his comment.
He had no option. He had no option because, like I said, people today have a zero tolerance policy towards such absurd glorification of monsters. So obviously, if you provoke people, if you keep reminding him of the flawed legacy of Aurangzeb, there will be a reaction. Like I understand there are demands to remove his tomb, and it would not be fair if I skip that part of the question, or if I skip that issue. Point is, Devendra Fadnavis ji has made it very clear we relate with the sentiments of the descendants of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. But a tomb which has over the last several decades being preserved by the ASI. And who brought it under ASI? Obviously, the Congress of 50s, 60s, 70s, the Congress of that era was looking for new icons among barbarians like Tipu Sultan and Aurangzeb. Why? Because they realized they could not work for the upliftment of the Muslim community, so they much rather wanted to create false icons within the Muslim community. Now, these damages cannot be undone overnight. If at all the descendants of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj approach the courts of law, we will, support the legal process. But like I said, we need to move on. Please don't provoke the Hindu community. Like I mentioned, Aurangzeb reminds us of ISIS. He was the original ISIS, and such mentality has no place in Indian society. So please don't glorify him and keep provoking the Hindu community.
Okay. So I will ask you another question on this issue, which is that do you think some historians had a role in covering these issues earlier?
Well, absolutely. The communist historians created false heroes. All our history books, at least when I was growing up, and even now, many of the history books are written from the point of view of intruders, from the point of view of marauders, from the point of view of looters. They're not written from the point of view of local heroes. Then there are lots of stories of bravery of our local heroes who withstood the plunderous attacks over the last 1,000 years. I think those stories need to come to the fore. I will give you one example. In the 8th century, Kashmir had a ruler in Lalitaditya, whose kingdom in that age is said to have expanded from the present day Turkey to the present day Karnataka in the south. Why don't we read about Lalitaditya? I understand, there are loopholes in the kind of information that is available, first-hand information which is available, because a lot of these were destroyed over time by Mughal rulers. The destruction of the Nalanda Vishwavidyalaya library by a person called Bakhtiyar Khilji, unfortunately, in whose name exists a town called Bakhtiyarpur in Bihar, was one of the prime culprits. But there are many other unknown culprits who have destroyed literature, who have destroyed history. So the communist historians, post-independence, I think took advantage of the lack of research or the lack of authentic first-hand information available from that period, and used it to paint a false picture of secular heroes. Aurangzeb was not secular. I'm sorry, Babur was not secular. Akbar was not secular.
Akbar.
Even Akbar was not secular.
Why?
There are many instances, one can't get into it in this point of time, but for him, all of these were deals. Like basically,
There was no
many
communal harmony.
That is precisely what I'm exactly trying to tell you. These are images which were painted over a period of time by the communist historians. If you dig deeper into history, you will come across maybe lesser instances of brutality, but the instances of brutality for not converting are huge. And of course, like in the time of Aurangzeb, it reached another level with jizya tax, with all kinds of taxations, but you still have apologists for Aurangzeb, for Babur, for Akbar, who managed to successfully paint him. See, there are leaders and politicians who very carefully try to nurture a certain image. So I'm certain that Akbar probably inculcated, or he cultivated, a certain image of secularism because he had a very sage advisor in Birbal. But then, if you dig deeper in history, even in the case of Akbar, there would be multiple instances of the similar brutality, if not exactly the same, where people did not heed to his demand for conversion, or where, he was met with opposition. So I think, one needs to grow beyond these, and history for a change now needs to be visited from the point of view of our kings who withstood these intrusions.
Okay.
And I'm glad some effort has happened in this direction. There is a wonderful big book by Dr. Chandni Sengupta. She's an assistant professor in one of the Delhi University colleges. And that book brings out the story of unsung Hindu rulers, unsung Hindu kings, across centuries. Similar books are being written. I think it's about time we revisit history from the point of view of Hindu kings who withstood these invasions and withstood these plundering acts.
Okay. So we will leave it there. So now coming on the another issue which took a communal angle, which should not be, that is Waqf bill, the Waqf amendment bill, which was introduced in 2024. The last time it was amended was in 1995, and we had a talk earlier in our last interview on the Waqf bill. So what tell us a bit about that?
See, the 1994 amendment to the Waqf Act, which was brought by the Narasimha Rao government, had a lot of malified intentions in it. There is a particular section 40 which gave unbridled powers to the Waqf board to acquire new property merely on the assumption that this property at one point of time belonged to the Waqf. So even the process of verification was, again, if you went to the tribunal invariably supported the Waqf board in such situations. Now this was not only harmful for Hindus, for non-Muslims, but even the poor Muslims were suffering, ad nauseum because of this very illogical amendment in the Waqf Act of 1995. Now, the present Waqf amendment essentially undoes the damage which was done by 1995 amendment. Of course, there are some sweeping changes also. For example, only a practicing Muslim, a person who has been a practicing Muslim for the last 5 years, can have the right to own or donate Waqf property. Plus, non-Muslim members are being included in the Waqf board. I'll tell you why this is important. Because invariably, the properties which the Waqf board has claimed, most of them belong to non-Muslims. Okay. So, in Tamil Nadu, there is a particular village where Waqf has claimed that village belongs to the Waqf board. Now, that village has a temple which has existed for the last 1500 years. In Haryana, there is a village, similarly, which the Waqf board has claimed as its own. Now, that village in Haryana has a Gurudwara which has existed for the last 400 years. The same applies to Kerala, where the land of Christians have been usurped. The land of Jains have been usurped in Bangalore. So it's about time the Waqf board had non-Muslim members also, so that the claims of Waqf board and the process of easily giving the land to Waqf board could not be that grossly one-sided.
Yeah.
And that is a very important, very sweeping change which will have a huge repercussion going ahead. Essentially, the Waqf board had started acting as a land jihad, as a land mafia. And today that is one of the reasons why after Army, after the Indian Railways, the third highest quantum of land in this country belongs to the Waqf board.
No.
Now, I would like you to see it alongside the demography distortion which is invariably happening in all parts of the country. And if you kind of club the two together, you will realize the insidious design which the two carry. One is demographic distortion and demographic change over the next 100 years, coupled with putting land ownership into the hands of a certain community to which it does not currently belong. I think that is a larger, malified, insidious plan of usurping the country, making it an Islamic country, which we need to fight against. And I think, the present amendment to the Waqf Act is a very far-sighted one. It's a very bold one. Just prior to the 2014 Lok Sabha elections, the Congress government had brought in an ordinance wherein they gave 133 properties, if I'm not mistaken, in the heart of Delhi. They transferred it to the Waqf board, which were obviously through an order promulgated by us a couple of years back. We had put all of that on hold. But I think, the Congress party supports this act of land usurping by a certain group.
It's not only the Congress party, even several other opposition parties are also opposing it, especially the TMC.
The regional parties tend to be short-sighted. They don't look at issues beyond their, specific electoral zones. But the sad part is that Congress party, which has a national presence, or at least a semi-national presence today, I may use that word, that party has started acting as a fringe. That party has started acting as the modern day Muslim League, which makes the situation untenable, which makes it very necessary for BJP to take some very firm and resolute stand in national interest to protect India from being usurped by the radical groups. I think there is a larger plan involved in it, which, if not us, the succeeding generations will realize.
So, okay, so I will leave it there. So, as you talked about the regional parties, I will talk about a regional party which is closer to you, in the sense that you belong to that state, and the party also belongs from that state, and that is JMM,
Yeah.
Jharkhand Mukti Morcha.
Yes.
So, you made a press conference yesterday at BJP's headquarters on the CAG report, where you were telling that 19,000 crores in the health sector were gone in scam. So tell us a bit about that. What happened? And why the national media is not covering this thing?
The reason for doing a national, a press conference in Delhi on the scams of Jharkhand was very clear. A small state like Jharkhand often gets overlooked by the national media. But the quantum of the magnitude of scams, the magnitude of mismanagement and corruption which is taking place over there is unparalleled.
Now, the number you are saying, it is really...
No, there are multiple such anomalies. So 91,125 crore has been spent without due certification of the work, but at the same time, 1,04,000 crores or something has not been paid for despite the verification certificates. So you can imagine the level of gross mismanagement which is unfolding in Jharkhand. Obviously, short contingency funds have been withdrawn without adequate reasoning. There is acute shortage of medical staff. There is acute shortage of medicines. But in spite of all that, instead of expanding the coverage of Ayushman Bharat, the Jharkhand government has recently brought out a notification which will severely truncate the coverage of Ayushman Bharat. So there are absurd provisions, like only hospitals which have 50 plus beds in urban centers will qualify to be under coverage of Ayushman Bharat. Now in the entire Jharkhand, maybe, you may find 18 to 20 max hospitals in urban centers. But beyond that, I don't think the Ayushman Bharat coverage would exist, because in rural areas, they are demanding 30 beds per hospital for the hospital to be eligible for coverage. I don't think any hospital in rural Jharkhand has 30 beds. So, the Jharkhand state government, especially, and plus that is one part of it. Like you mentioned, the corruption, mismanagement is one part of it. If you travel to the Santhal Parganas area, the demographic distortion, which again is a very planned thing by parties like Congress Party and JMM, that has taken unstoppable proportions. The Jharkhand High Court has passed a stern ruling on it. There needs to be stern measures, there needs to be firm measures to curb it. The Jharkhand state government is not cooperating on that score. And that area, unfortunately, over a period of time, we fear could become a hotbed of terror activities of Bangladeshi outfits. This is a point which we have been raising, because unless there is NRC in that area, the demographic distortion cannot be curtailed. At one point of time, when we attained independence, the tribal population of Santhal Parganas was in the vicinity of 42-43%. Today, it has come down to a mere 26%. So all of these are very grave issues, and I think it is about time the national media covers smaller states like Jharkhand, where unspeakable corruption, in the same way I was speaking about unspeakable monstrosity of Aurangzeb, there is unspeakable corruption over here, which is looting the state. And obviously, there is one very interesting factor which I figured out. The Jharkhand state health minister in the JMM Congress alliance has always been of the Congress party. And, Congress has this penchant for discovering new ATMs, because that is the only way Congress can stay relevant. It is running short of funds. So whichever state it manages to get its hands on, they loot the state left, right, and center. So maybe they figured out that the health sector is where the maximum scams can be perpetrated, and that is the reason why the Congress party clings to the health department and carries out those scams through its health ministers. Initially, it was Banna Gupta. Now they have Irfan Ansari as the health minister. So these issues need national coverage, and that was the reason for yesterday's press conference.
Okay, so the number, you may say that the state is small, but the number is not small.
Numbers are, numbers have no comparison. They will put other states to shame. And like I mentioned, like when it comes to law and order, I think it's about time Hemant Soren spends some time in Uttar Pradesh and realizes how, the law and order situation can be brought under control. Because UP has 75 districts, Jharkhand is 24. Now, the population of Jharkhand is almost 1/7 or maybe 1/8 of Uttar Pradesh. If a chief minister cannot maintain law and order in that small area vis-a-vis Uttar Pradesh, then I think he needs to spend some time in Sambhal. He needs to meet the police officials of Sambhal and realize how jihadi elements can be curtailed in Jharkhand.
Okay, so we will leave it there. Thank you, Tuhin Sinha, for joining us. And do like and share the video and do subscribe.